The most dangerous teams always grow in silence, away from the headlines, away from the pressure. That is exactly what has been happening in Ecuador. While the football world remains obsessed with traditional giants, a fearless new generation has been taking shape in the shadows. Faster, stronger, hungrier. Most fans still don't see the threat coming, but by the time the 2026 World Cup arrives, it may already be too late.
забивает. 3-0.
For most of the 20th century, Ecuador was the country South America forgot existed. A British football journalist named Tim Vickery once called them a South American Luxembourg, and that phrase stings because it was earned. Their early Copa America record reads like a list of beatings, the kind of scoreboard nobody frames on a wall. Between 1962 and the year 2000, Ecuador tried to reach the World Cup 10 times and failed 10 times. That is not bad luck. That is identity. And here's what people miss when they talk about underdog stories. Most countries that fail for 40 years build a culture of failing. They learn to accept it. They protect the players from blame. They protect the coaches from pressure. They protect the federation from change. Ecuador did all of that for decades, and it almost broke them as a footballing nation. That right there is the part that makes what is happening now feel impossible. Because no country that loses for 40 years usually wakes up one morning with the best defense on the continent. Countries do not transform. They drift. They wait for one generation of accidents and then drift back. Ecuador refused to drift, and somebody quietly decided to do something different about it. The story of the next World Cup does not start in 2026. It starts in 2007 in a small town outside Quito, with a club that almost nobody noticed. A club called Independiente del Valle was taken over by investors who said the quiet part out loud. They were not trying to win league titles in Ecuador. They were building a place to produce and sell young players to Europe. That sentence sounds boring written down. In practice, it changed the entire South American football map. They built their own training facilities. They built their own school for the boys so they could study and train in the same place. They scouted poor neighborhoods that other clubs were too lazy or too snobbish to drive into. They went to Esmeraldas. They went to the Chota Valley. They went where talent grows when nobody is looking. And here is the observation that explains everything that follows. Independiente del Valle is not a football club. It is a workshop disguised as one. And the players you are about to fall in love with at the World Cup are not the product of a national miracle. They are the product of a single building with the right people inside it. Out of one recent Ecuador starting 8 players, including 6 starters, came from that one academy. Take a breath and think about what that actually means. It means Ecuador's national team is essentially one club team in disguise. The chemistry, the trust, the language, and the shared coaches from age 12 onward. That is not a coincidence. That is a system that decided to outwork richer countries who never bothered to build one. Colombia has 52 million people. Ecuador has 18. Colombia has the money, the league, the history. Ecuador has a factory, and right now the factory is winning. That factory was not building random kids. It was building specific men for specific jobs. And one of those men is now the best defender on the planet. His name is Willian Pacho. He was born in Quinindé in Esmeraldas, the Afro-Ecuadorian heartland that most tourists never see and most football scouts ignored for decades. He came through Independiente del Valle. He moved to Europe, and then, very quietly, he won the Champions League twice in a row. As a starter, not as a squad player, not as a substitute who got minutes in the group stage. As the man Luis Enrique trusts to mark the most dangerous attackers in the world, Harry Kane, Vinicius Jr., Mohamed Salah. Whoever stepped in front of him stepped into a problem they did not solve that night. And here is the part that should make your jaw drop. He is the first Ecuadorian to ever win a Champions League final. Then he won the second one too, back to back. Ecuador, a country whose entire footballing existence was once described as a chamber of horrors, now has the European champion in their starting 11. That is not a sentence anyone in 1990 would have believed possible if you wrote it on the wall in front of them. After the second final, in front of the cameras, Pacho was asked how it felt. And what he said was honest in a way most modern footballers have forgotten how to be. He said, "The truth is, I never dreamed it, but here we are, celebrating. No script, no rehearsed line. Just a man from Kininde telling the world he had outgrown his own imagination. Pacho is not the loud one. He is the foundation, and the foundation is what holds everything else up." Then there is Moisés Caicedo, the captain, the midfielder Chelsea paid a fortune to sign. The boy who, according to one documentary about his life, started his football journey barefoot in a town nobody important visits. Independiente del Valle found him. Brighton developed him. Chelsea broke their own pricing rules to get him. In 2025, Caicedo lifted the FIFA Club World Cup with Chelsea. They beat Paris Saint-Germain in the final, 3-0. So inside this Ecuador squad, you have the man who won the Champions League final and the man who beat him in the Club World Cup final, sharing a dressing room, sharing a dream, sharing a country. That dressing room is not a normal dressing room. That is a room with two of the heaviest trophies in club football already on the shelf. And they are still wearing the same shirt as kids they grew up with. I do not think people have fully understood what that does to a national team. Confidence is contagious in football, the way doubt is contagious in failing teams. These men do not flinch in big stadiums anymore. They built their reputations in them. And the man building the structure around them is not Ecuadorian at all. He is Argentine, which is itself a small miracle of trust, because Ecuador and Argentina are not exactly old friends in football. His name is Sebastián Beccacece, and he is the head coach. He took the job in August of 2024, and in an interview with a Spanish newspaper, he said something that tells you everything you need to know about the way he thinks. He said he wanted his Ecuador to defend like Arsenal and attack like Barcelona. Now, most coaches say things like that, and it means nothing. It is press conference dust. With Beccacece, half of it is already true. In the qualifiers for the next World Cup, Ecuador conceded only 5 goals in 18 matches. 5. That is not a typo. That is the best defensive record on the continent, ahead of Argentina, ahead of Brazil, ahead of Colombia, ahead of every country with a richer league and a louder pundit class. Ecuador finished second in those qualifiers, behind only the reigning world champions. And the proof was not on paper. It was on the grass. In Barranquilla, away to Colombia, Ecuador went down to 10 men early. Most teams collapse in that situation. Ecuador won the match 1-0. Then in September of 2025, they beat the world champions, Argentina, 1-0. The Argentine press, the loudest press in football, used a phrase you almost never read about them. They wrote that we were beaten. Not robbed, not unlucky, beaten. That is when the rest of the world should have started paying attention. Some of us were not paying close enough attention yet. But Ecuador have a problem, and it is the same problem every great defensive team eventually meets in a knockout round. They cannot score enough. In recent months, they have drawn match after match by margins, so thin a feather could decide them. Several of those draws were 0-0. A team that does not concede is a team you cannot lose to. But a team that does not score is a team you cannot fully trust either. The best version of this Ecuador wins 1-0, twice in a knockout round, and walks into a semi-final nobody saw coming. The worst version of this Ecuador draws 0-0 in the group stage, draws 0-0 again in the round of 16, and goes home on penalties wondering what could have been. The names that make the difference are Kendry Páez, the 17-year-old Chelsea bought and loaned to France to develop, and Gonzalo Plata, who won the Copa Libertadores with Flamengo. If either of them catches fire, Ecuador becomes a different kind of monster. If neither of them does, the wall stays beautiful, but the ceiling stays low. That tension is the entire story. A team built like a fortress trying to learn very quickly how to also be a sword. Ecuador have been drawn in Group E with Germany, the Ivory Coast, and Curaçao. A debut opponent, a sleeping giant, and a tournament veteran all in one group. It is the kind of draw that excites a coach and terrifies a federation. And Beccacece has already said publicly that he is looking forward to playing Germany in New York. But the real weight on this squad is not the group draw. The real weight is everything I have just told you stacked on top of these men's shoulders. A country that spent 40 years failing to qualify. A community in Esmeraldas that produced most of this team, but rarely sees its story told with respect. A captain who started barefoot. A defender who never dreamed of European nights. A coach borrowed from a rival country who said out loud that Ecuador can win the best World Cup of its history. If this story moved you, tell me in the comments which player on this Ecuador team you are most excited to watch next summer. And if you think they can actually go all the way, drop your prediction below so we can come back to it after the tournament.